Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's program. A familiar face is joining me today in the studio, and after we come back, you'll see my conversation with LA Council member Paul Krekorian. Welcome back, everyone. Joining me in the studio today is Los Angeles City Council member Paul Krekorian. Welcome back, Mr. Krekorian.
Thank you, Ada. It's always a pleasure.
Always good to have you here. And I kind of want to start with the hottest topics that is in all of our minds, which is the November 8th elections, and obviously the presidential race is dominating the media coverage. What are your thoughts on what's going on in our country? Because it's quite, unprecedented.
It is. I barely know where to begin. But you're certainly right that most of all of our attention has been absorbed by this presidential race that's going on. But I think at the same time, it's important for everyone to remember that the November ballot has a huge number of very critically important races aside from president, as well as ballot measures and other things that we're going to be voting on. And participation is and always will be essential for every American. And sometimes we can be frustrated by this process, sometimes even disgusted by a lot of what we see in the campaigns that go back and forth. But I hope that won't dissuade people from participating, from educating themselves about the issues and the candidates and participating, because our way of life and our American democracy really depends on that. It depends on participation. It seems like each year, each election, overall voter participation declines. And I think part of the reason for that is that people feel that they don't have meaningful choices, or they don't have an important role to play in the process. And that just could not be farther from the truth. Our participation determines what kind of government we'll have. Our participation determines what kind of political campaigns candidates will run. So if we come out in large numbers, within our Armenian community and more broadly across America, if we come out and participate in elections in large numbers, we will have an improved electoral process, a better government, and a more responsive government. We've certainly seen that has been true within our community, within the Armenian community. It wasn't that many years ago, 20 years or so ago, when very few Armenians voted. It was very rare to see an Armenian candidate. And you very well know how much that's changed over the years. And now in every election, we see Armenian turnout much higher, at a much higher rate than the overall population. And that makes our community more influential in the outcome. And it causes elected officials and others to pay more attention to the issues that matter to us because we participate.
Certainly, one of the examples of that is the Genocide Centennial March in LA, that the entire city, with all of its infrastructure and apparatus, was basically there to support, to participate in all of that, because we have become a voice in the community. But at the same time, going back to the 2016 race, you look at social media, you turn on the TV, everything is Trump, Clinton, and the tenor keeps getting, I want to say, more disgusting as the time goes on. What are your thoughts on how the electorate can kind of go about its business, but also make sure that it's not hindered by that cackle that's happening on a daily basis?
Well, I think it's important for people to educate themselves about candidates and issues from sources other than social media, first of all, because while that's entertaining and often interesting and even sometimes informative, it's not necessarily a reliable source of good information. And so I think people need to take it upon themselves to educate themselves as citizens, to read the newspaper, to read Asbarez, to read the Los Angeles Times, to understand what candidates actually stand for. I think that's very important, and to understand the issues that we're going to be voting on in the ballot measures as well. I mean, there's a lot on this ballot. We're electing a new United States Senator for the first time in a generation.
Yes.
We have two very good Armenian candidates for the state assembly. We have to re-elect Adri Nazarian, and we have to elect Arti Khachatourian in my old seat in the assembly, in the 43rd Assembly District. This is vitally important for this community. So no matter what you think about other races, these are the sorts of things that will dramatically impact our future, dramatically impact the interests of this community for many years to come.
You also talked about the ballot measures. Throughout these election cycles, we keep getting calls from our readers or viewers saying, so what is this measure, what is that measure, and we have to explain to them. But one key effort is Measure M that's going to come up, and that's why it's critical for all of us to participate in the elections, because these measures also impact our daily lives, if passed or if not. Measure M is about improving the transportation infrastructure in LA County. Talk to us about that.
Sure. Well, Measure M is a county-wide measure that will be on our ballot that will provide for an enormous investment in transportation infrastructure and also in keeping fares low for seniors, for students, and others. So this will be, I think, a kind of a game-changing measure for transportation in Los Angeles County and all parts of the county, from Montebello, Pasadena, Glendale, Hollywood, throughout the county. We're going to be seeing significant benefits in investment in new infrastructure, local transportation like dash buses and other things, street improvements, potholes and other things that will create streets in better repair, highway improvements, access for our disabled community, door-to-door access transportation. These are all things that will be improved and supported by the passage of Measure M.
And what is Measure M? Is it a bond?
It will be a small half-cent increase in sales tax, and that revenue source that will come from that sales tax will be dedicated strictly to these transportation projects. So that works out for the average consumer to about $2 a month. So for less than the price of 1 gallon of gasoline per month, we will realize enough revenues to pay for over $120 billion worth of investment in our transportation infrastructure. We will create almost 500,000 new, good, middle-class jobs, and we'll create a transit system that will be able to service all parts of this county throughout the rest of the 21st century. So my kids and their kids will benefit from this tiny investment that we're making now, will provide dividends for many generations to come.
We're going to continue on this topic after a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our conversation with Los Angeles City Council member Paul Krekorian. You were talking about Measure M, which is going to be on the November 8th ballot, about a huge investment in the transportation infrastructure in the LA County. And you also talked about that it is an, 0.5% increase on the sales tax that is going to fund it, which is about $2 a month per taxpayer. Are there federal matching grants or funds that come into this type of a project?
Oh, absolutely. Whenever we invest in a big capital-intensive transportation project like a light rail line or a subway, or even highway improvements. We need to take local money and then add federal money and sometimes a little state money as well to come up with a package to pay for it. Now, if we don't have a reliable local funding source for those projects, the federal government is much less likely to provide us with grant funding. So federal money that might otherwise come to Los Angeles will instead go to Florida or Washington or North Dakota. And so it's really important that that we're able to show to our representatives in Washington that we've made a local commitment. We have a steady, reliable stream of revenue that we can count on to be able to fund these big projects, and then we'll be much more attractive for federal grant funding.
And that guarantee is the passage of Measure M,
That's right.
Essentially. So if voters go out in November and vote for this and it passes, it signals to Washington that we're committed to these changes.
Right. So in effect, that $2 a month that we'll be paying will produce much more than that, because it will generate federal money. It will also generate the great likelihood of public-private investment. So you'll have private sector investment in these transit projects as well based on that. So you're not only getting a good return on your investment standing by itself, but when you add the multiplier effect of the other money that it will generate, it's just really a tremendous investment in our future. A very small amount of money that produces great dividends in jobs creation, economic activity, mobility throughout our county, and bringing money in from outside as well.
Here's where I have to make a disclaimer that I use the public transportation
I'm glad
on
you do.
a daily basis to go around pretty much everywhere. And I have seen great improvements in the past decade or so that I have been using public transportation. What is this new plan envision to do?
Well, you're right. And when I was growing up here in Los Angeles, we had essentially no public transit. The public transit was the bus, and that was it.
The white buses with
But
the
what
yellow
you've
writing.
seen since then, we've seen a significant investment in a lot of projects, whether it's the red line, the blue line, and other things. But as those have been built, I think many people have been sort of surprised to see how much Los Angeles has embraced those projects. And we have people eager now to take transit, when not too long ago, people assumed Angelenos would never get out of their car. It's clear now people throughout Los Angeles want more transit. So we have a good backbone of a system right now, but we don't have a system that reaches all parts of the county. And so if you happen to live near a line and work near a line, you're in good shape. But that's not enough people. So with Measure M, we'll be able to add so many different branches onto the existing backbone that it will actually bring a lot of new riders into the system, because now you'll be able to get not only from point A to point B, but from point A to points B, C, D, E, and F. And that's, I think, the real game-changing aspect of this. Just by way of example, one of the things that people look at when they come to Los Angeles from anywhere in the world, and it causes them to scratch their head in amazement, is that we don't have transit that goes into our international airport. This is one of the busiest airports on Earth, and we don't have a transit system to connect to it. That's crazy. So Measure M will connect the airport with the rest of the transit system by rail. Look at the 405 and the Sepulveda Pass. This is one of the worst, most congested freeway areas in America, not just in Los Angeles. What Measure M would allow is, with that funding, we'll be able to build a transit line through the Sepulveda Pass. And in all likelihood, it would be a tunnel through the mountain, which would have subway or light rail through that pass, taking a tremendous load off of the freeway. That's going to help everyone. But there's so many other things. It's many, many projects that have been identified by each part of the county through a process that took more than 2 years of gathering public input to identify what are the highest priorities for each region and then ensuring that each one of those priorities is included within this measure as specified projects.
You're very well versed on this issue because Paul Krekorian is also on the MTA board. And I mean, just the new expo line that opened up last spring has brought in a lot of new visitors to where I live on the west side, and it's enabled people to, you know, go to work. Give us an update on what's going on the purple line that is supposed to also extend all the way to Westwood.
So you're right, the Expo line, with the completion of the Expo line, first time people have been able to take rail to the beach in my lifetime. I mean, they used to be able to do that when my mom was growing up, but first time in a half a century that we've had rail to the beach. The Purple Line, Subway to the Sea, is continuing on, and that will be completed at least through the Westwood area, so that we'll have a direct connection between Westwood and downtown. Think of what the traffic load, the congestion load that will take off of all of the streets on the west side, the 405, all of the east-west streets that cross, big boulevards that cross Los Angeles. These are the kinds of big moments in transportation that people look back upon and say, that was when it changed. When we completed that, that's when it changed. And we can be a part of that by making sure we approve this measure and continue on in the progress that we've made.
How do we get people out of their cars and into public transit? It's always been this question mark for me. I'm seeing more and more younger professionals doing it, but how about those people who love their cars and don't want to give it up?
Well, several things. First, you have to make it easy to use and easy to get where you want to go. So if you have to take, you know, 2 buses to get to a train and then get someplace and then take another bus to get, most people who drive are not going to bother. Unless they have to, they're not going to bother. That's why these investments are so important, because with more investment in particular infrastructure, more lines, more bus rapid transit system, more light rail, more subway, when you have more of it going to more places, you have more people who are able to easily use the system. So that's number one. Number two, you have to make it convenient in terms of time. And the same thing, I mean, if we have rail, at the same time that congestion is getting worse on the streets, if we have more investment in rail, the difference in time savings becomes greater and more people are going to opt for taking transit. And then the third thing is we have to make it inexpensive to use. And Measure M also does that by providing funding that's specifically intended to keep fares low, and especially for our senior disabled and student population, for whom price really means a lot.
We're going to continue this conversation. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking today with Los Angeles City Council member Paul Krekorian, who's also on the board of the MTA, which is basically spearheading Measure M, which is going to be on your ballot on November 8th. It is a overhaul of our transportation system in LA County. You brought up during the last segment that, for example, this new change is going to build a rail line toward LAX, which we don't have. How is that going to impact some of the Armenian hubs in Los Angeles? For example, Glendale is not sort of connected to downtown. Is there going to be something changing there that would provide more easy access to downtown, or what are some of those plans?
Yeah, well, one of my priorities has been, and this is included in Measure M as well, has been to connect what the gold line, the orange line that we currently have in the San Fernando Valley with the gold line in the Pasadena, San Gabriel Valley area. So, and this measure will provide funding for a bus rapid transit connection there, so that it'll be very easy for people who are crossing the San Fernando Valley, going to Bob Hope Airport, to go all the way through, connecting with the Gold Line and then points east. So that is a very important missing link, I think, that will be connected up, that will help both Burbank and Glendale and Pasadena a lot. In addition, this measure provides for improvements to MetroLink, our commuter rail system, which of course passes past Bob Hope Airport and through Burbank and then on to downtown as well. Significant improvements in that service. And then the other thing is that a lot of this money is set aside for what we call local return, which means even if you're a city that's not near a subway or a light rail line, you're going to get money every year to spend on circulation, on street improvements, the B line or the Dash lines, those sorts of local buses, and street repairs and maintenance, and pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure too, which is very important for our kids to make sure that they're safe getting to and from school, for example. It will also provide a dedicated source of income for access service for our senior and disabled communities, the door-to-door kind of service that so many of our seniors depend upon now to get to where they need to go. So Glendale will benefit from that. Burbank, every city in Los Angeles County will benefit from that local return money, from the fare preservation and reduction money, and from the access services money.
But what's the time frame? Let's assume that on the 8th this measure passes. When can we see, I know there's certain projects that are already started, but when can we see some of the changes that you're talking about?
So right now, Metro has a number of rail lines under construction today, and those are funded projects. Those will continue on. As the sales tax revenue starts to be generated from Measure M, that will provide an opportunity for additions to those projects. And those are charted out over the next 30 or so years already. So there are some projects that will begin right away in the first 10 years earlier, in the first 5 years of that revenue stream, projects will get started. And then others will follow on as the revenues start to come in. Now the goal is that once we have a guaranteed, dedicated source of money, we can expedite those projects by going to the federal government and bonding against this revenue stream, or by getting federal guarantees that will allow us to take that guaranteed revenue stream and front load it so that we can work on more of the projects right away, which will be a great stimulative effect to our economy, putting a lot of people to work right here locally. The money that they make will be spent in our local economy. So that is the dream scenario, to be able to get this dedicated funding stream and then use the private sector, the federal government, the bond markets, and so on, to expedite these projects and get more done quicker.
And we've also seen these types of developments also impact local businesses, especially around, for example, the Expo line is seeing new businesses develop around where the stops are, whatnot. Are they getting some kind of help and assistance from the county or the city to be part of this type of a project?
Well, in fact, Metro now has adopted a clear policy to develop transit-oriented communities, so to encourage housing, retail, commercial, entertainment development around transit hubs. And take, for example, the North Hollywood Red Line station, very close to the bulk of the Armenian population in the San Fernando Valley. It's also right in the middle of a great, vibrant, young, artsy community there, people who love to take transit. So Metro is making the decision to develop that parking lot into significant housing development with lots of commercial and retail there, to take advantage of the fact that it sits right on top of a transit line. People can live there, get straight onto the transit without ever getting into a car. People could come from elsewhere to find entertainment and shopping and so on. So Metro is very much committed to that. Metro has also been very committed in keeping the housing affordable. So we have a very high guarantee of set aside of the housing that gets developed in these transit-oriented communities for affordable housing, which will help, I think, everyone in Los Angeles.
Because that's usually why some people frown upon development, because it raises property values, and but if there is an effort to have affordable housing or keep housing affordable, that's definitely a plus for this thing. You've been in city council for a while now. How has Los Angeles changed since you first became city councilman?
Oh, all for the better, I have to say. Well, almost all for the better. I mean, that we continue to have challenges, of course, but when I was sworn in January of 2010, the city was still teetering on the precipice of bankruptcy. We had a massive budget deficit. People were speaking seriously about laying off 6,000 city employees. And since then, and since I became budget chair and took over administration of the city's finances, we've not only eliminated 85% of our structural long-term deficit, we've built up the largest budget reserve in the city's history. So we've become much more fiscally responsible, and now we've cut the unemployment rate in half in Los Angeles. We're putting people back to work on the city payroll to provide the kind of services that people in Los Angeles need. We're running as efficiently, I think, as we ever have, starting to bring services back, and businesses are flocking in. Economic activity is being generated. There's a sense of optimism about the future, and I think if we look ahead a little bit, I think there's a very good likelihood that we will be the host city for the 2024 Olympics. So when you take all of that together, you see the building that's going on downtown, foreign investment coming from around the world. These are people with real money who are betting on the future of Los Angeles, who are saying they think the future of Los Angeles is bright. And I agree with them. I think things have become tremendously better. We were looking into the abyss, and now we're looking at a much, much brighter future for Los Angeles.
I want to talk about the 2024 Olympics bid. We're going to talk about that when we come back. Please stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our conversation with LA City Councilman Paul Krekorian, who is representing the 2nd District. Welcome back. Some exciting stuff is coming up. 2024 Olympics. It would bring the Olympics back to Los Angeles exactly 40 years after it was last here. What's going on with that?
Well, we've just submitted the second round of the application process, the paperwork that goes to the International Olympic Committee, which will be evaluating the bids. All of the cities that were in contention, well, let me say, of all the cities that were in contention, I think it's fair to say that we are now in the top 2 candidates. Los Angeles and Paris are probably the 2 leading contenders for this. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity to win this for many, many reasons. First, Los Angeles is the only city in the world that has hosted 2 financially successful Olympics. In 1932 and then again in 1984, as you mentioned, we had terrific Olympic experiences, and we turned a profit on those games. In fact, there are kids in Los Angeles today who are still benefiting from the money that we generated in the 1984 Olympics. So that's what a success this was and how important it was for Los Angeles. But you also look at our population here. We have this very rich, diverse population. Everyone knows that we have the largest Armenian population in the Western Hemisphere. But the same could be said also of 30 or 40 other countries who have their largest diasporan population in Los Angeles. So if you're an Olympic athlete from anywhere in the world, there's a pretty good chance you're going to have people here
Yeah.
who are going to be cheering for you. You're going to have a home team advantage, which is great. That's what the Olympics is all about. Then you look at our facilities. Right now, we have plenty of world-class facilities, athletic facilities, that are ready to go right now. This is not a situation like Rio faced, where right up until the Olympics was ready to begin, they were still building things. That's not Los Angeles. We're ready to go. We've got the Rams already investing right now more than $1 billion in building a world-class stadium. And plus all what we already have with the Coliseum and the new LA Football Club soccer stadium and many, many other facilities. So we have an advantage, I think, over most cities because we don't have to build a lot of new things. And then if Measure M passes, a lot of these projects that I talked about will be finished by the 2024 Olympics, and we'll have a much more robust transit system as well, so traffic and congestion won't be as much of an issue. So I really like our chances. I happen to serve on the committee of the City Council that is vetting this and ensuring that this is a good opportunity for the people of Los Angeles, that we aren't going to get hit with a tax burden, that we aren't going to take on unnecessary risks and liabilities, and that we turn this into something that's a real positive experience for the people in Los Angeles and for participants from around the world.
One of the issues facing the city, and I know that the City Council has taken steps to remedy that, is the plight of homelessness in our city. For a city so vibrant and developed, it is such a sad situation. The City Council recently passed a measure to address that issue. Can you please talk about that?
Sure. Well, this is a long-term process, solving this problem, because it's been a long time in developing. And there are many different reasons that we have a large homeless population here. We're not alone. The rest of the country is seeing a spike in homelessness as well. So part of it is for economic reasons. We've just gone through the greatest economic collapse since the Great Depression, and people are still suffering from that. Unemployment, rising health costs that have caused many families to go into bankruptcy when they experience a health problem. So the high price of housing in Los Angeles, which, that differential between what people are earning and what they're paying is great. So our unaffordability is great. So part of it is just economic. Part of it is we've neglected mental health concerns in this country, and particularly here in California, for over 40 years. We haven't done enough to help those who are struggling with mental illness or people who are struggling with substance abuse too. And if we don't start taking that on, we're never going to have a sustainable solution to homelessness. So the city and the county, as well as our colleagues in the state government and our representatives in Congress, are really working together well for the first time in recent memory in attacking this problem. The city set aside in the budget that I just got passed by the council, the city set aside over $100 million in the first year that will go into affordable housing and a number of services. The county also, which provides most of the social services, mental health and the other issues, the county has made a major commitment of money, but also we've worked together on creating strategic plans with dozens and dozens of different programs and solutions to try to address this. But people have to understand it's one of the most difficult social problems that we have. This is not the kind of problem that government can just come in and fix. Yeah. It's an ingrained social problem that we have to all figure out solutions to and all commit to solving, because it's inexcusable that in the richest nation in the history of the world, in one of the richest cities in that nation, we have 27,000 people who tonight will be sleeping on our streets in this city. That's inexcusable, and to me that's a sign of a civil society that is not working. And so we have to really all agree that that's unacceptable, and we're going to commit to fixing it.
I think one of the key things that you just pointed out is that you know, city government can't like put a key and fix this issue. It's like the community, everyone needs to be involved in it because there's so many other components. Certainly, most of those people have not chosen to be on the street, so we all have to do our share to make that happen. At the top of the program, you talked about how you know, the Armenian community has changed here in California and Los Angeles, and you're seeing more representation by Armenians. What do you see Armenians doing in some of these issues that you talked about, whether it is the transportation component, whether it's developing the city, whether it's tackling the issue of homelessness or social services? How can the community be part of this?
Well, I think just like every other part of our society, as participants in the community of Los Angeles and as good citizens, I think we have to be engaged at every level, the governmental level, the nonprofit, faith community, everything. When it comes to transportation, for example, I happen to serve on the Metro Board along with Khachatourian. So we have disproportionate Armenian representation on the Metro Board, which is a good thing, and that's a product of engagement in government and people voting and people participating and encouraging new, young participants in government within our community. When it comes to things like homelessness, there are social services that our community can provide uniquely within our community, that, you know, to sectors that might be inaccessible to other nonprofit organizations. And for example, the Armenian Relief Society, which has done such wonderful work for Armenians and non-Armenians alike who are facing some of these challenges. And I've been so pleased to be able to partner with them in ensuring that they have adequate funding, and we've provided funding through city and federal sources to be able to provide social workers and others who can help individuals tackle those individual problems that they're dealing with and live more productive lives. But even if it's something as simple as participating through your own community organizations, through your church or other, there's something that everybody can do to make this city better. And it's not someone else's responsibility. I think Armenians and every other group of Americans have to understand that we all have to grab an oar. We're all in this together, and it's not somebody else's job, it's all of our jobs, and we each play an important role. And if we do that, and if we embrace that kind of commitment, then there's no limit to what we can accomplish.
Just like if you clean your house, take care of your house, this is your city, you need to do it in order to make sure that it develops. So Measure M on November 8th, let's hope it passes.
Yes on M.
Yes on M.
Don't forget Artie Khachatourian. Don't forget Adrien Nazarian.
Yeah. And the website is voteyesonm.org. Go there for more information, and certainly really compelling visuals, which you saw during the program. You'll get to see how the transportation infrastructure is going to change. Thank you so much for coming back.
It's always a pleasure.
And we'll have you back more next year as we're looking toward the municipal races and issues in 2017. Thank you.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Have a good evening. See you next time.